What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, joined here by Vish Kumaran of Blake and Vish Sports. Is that the way I should be bringing it up, or is it just you're just Vish and you're just Vish on his own?
Well, I mean, I like that you plug our YouTube channel because, even though technically it's not like an organization or an affiliation, I like being Vish Kumaran from something. But yeah, I'm technically just Vish, and Blake's just Blake, and we have Blake and Vish Sports. But yeah,
awesome. So this stream today is going to be based around Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel. So there's something that I subscribe to as a fantasy football player that helps me understand who's actually winning routes and things like that. And it's called Reception Perception, which is done by Matt Harmon for Yahoo Sports. It's behind a paywall, guys, but honestly, it's great work. It charts success routes and it charts the route percentage of each route run. So it's a good indicator of basically the methodology is about who's getting open, who's creating separation. And I think that everybody kind of understands that Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel are two different players with two different skill sets. Okay. I wanted to bring Vish on here because Vish is a big Deebo Samuel guy, as you guys know. Anytime that you ever hear him talk, he's usually telling you that Deebo Samuel is his favorite player in the league. Doesn't change the objectivity, but it is somebody. I wanted to get somebody on here who not only one is smart, knows his stuff, but two, definitely at three, definitely has a passion for Deebo Samuel. So, Vish, talk to me a little bit about, you tried to talk about it before we jumped on, the methodology of how reception perception is run and some of the things that you kind of not have issues with, but you have things that you want to talk about when it comes to that.
So when I see something like anything that's done as a charting exercise, my first and foremost thing, and the thing that bothers me in something like PFF or EPA or any type of kind of a little more nuanced metric that measures something, my biggest problem is that people use it as an end-all be-all statistic to fit their claim. So like now that you posted the reception perception graphs about Brandon Aiyuk and how his win rate was basically green on every single route, you're going to see, I'm sure you're going to open Twitter some random day in July and you're going to get quote tweeted in some random comment thread where some Niners fan is going to be arguing with some Vikings fan that Aiyuk is better than Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, right.
Right. Or Aiyuk is better than CeeDee Lamb.
Aiyuk
is better than Chase Claypool. You're just going to see that argument. And so my problem with the entire thing is, we've had a little fun about it, but I'm a big guy when it comes to nuance. I think this is one metric that should be used for evaluation, but I think the methodology does need to be taken into account because so when this guy, Matt Harmon, who's done an incredible job, this is incredibly in-depth work. What he's doing when he's watching these receivers is he's solely just watching the individual receiver and judging the route that they are running. He's not judging the concept. He's not judging what the defense, what coverage they're in. He's not judging the style of coverage that's being used to defend a player. So, a guy like DK Metcalf who constantly sees safeties rolled over to his side. I didn't look at DK Metcalf's 9-route percentage, but I wonder how he charts a win for DK Metcalf if he beats the corner because the safety's rolled right on top. But then how do you chart that as a win? Because the corner is usually probably going to be played out of phase and in trail, knowing that they have help over the top on DK Metcalf. So they want to take away comebacks. They want to take away the blaze outs and all of that. So I didn't fully get into reading how he would chart something like that, but certainly I'm sure there's a bit more human error and nuance when it comes to something like that. I'm sure there's a little bit of nuance when it comes to sample size, right? Like the sample size is important. For example, Brandon Aiyuk had an 83% win rate when it came to post routes. He also only ran post routes 6.8% of the time, which means that if he lost 2 more post routes, all of a sudden his post route percentage probably goes from 83% to 60% because the sample size is that small. So because of all of those things, I do think that this is a really interesting charting exercise. I think it's a very in-depth charting exercise. I think it's a phenomenally done charting exercise, but I don't think it should be the end-all be-all in use to evaluate receivers. It's just another very good metric that you should use to help you in forming an overall opinion.
Absolutely, and I agree with you 100%. And another example that I'm going to use is the screen. Okay, screens are open most of the time. And he ran a screen 6.3% of the time. He was 100% success rate. But here's the issue. Someone was asking me the same thing on Twitter. I didn't really get a chance to answer just because the notifications were all coming in. But sometimes defenders and defenses, they sniff out those screens. So if someone has a lower success rate on a screen, it's not because he didn't get open. It's because the defense sniffed that out, honestly. So that's something else that really needs to be, again, this is one piece of the puzzle. This is, again, film, this, all this stuff has to line up. Everything has to line up before you make your assessment of both these guys. But I do love this methodology. I do love this exercise as well, too, because not only does Matt Harmon graph or chart the route percentage and the success, but he also charts the success against man, zone, press, and doubles. Right. And I think that's the part that really should show you a little bit more about the receivers. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. We've already been talking about Brandon Aiyuk. Let's start with him. So Brandon Aiyuk, first year in the league, remember, didn't start the first few games, had an injury in training camp. So let's just go through some of his route percentages before we get through the success percentages. So 9 routes, which are straight line, straight down the field, 17.8% of the time. Post, 6.3%, as Vish alluded to. 4.5% on corner routes. So if a 9 is straight, then the post is this way, corner's that way. Okay? Digs, 13.6%. Outs, 9.8%. Comebacks, 7.3%. Curls, 8.7%. Then you have your last 4, which are not intermediate routes. I guess they would be described as short area routes more than anything. Flats, slants, screens, and other. So other is the part that, Vish, I'm not really too sure what other means when it comes to those. Are those like deep overs? Are those straight flat routes? I mean, or I don't know. Is it like a post corner?
Is it like a post corner? Is it like a blaze out? Is it like a Dino route, which is post corner post?
Or choice routes, things like that. There's probably things like that are in there. So flat routes, 4.5%, slants, 18.5%, and screens, 6.3%. Now the success rate on all of these, on the 9 route, which is the straight line, 62.7%, corner, 61.5%, post, 83.3%, out, 75%, dig, 74%, comeback, 81%, curl, 88%. I'm going to stop right there. All of those are green. All of those are green. Again, you have to take into account how often he ran those routes. But from this, if you took this and you looked right at it, you would say, man, this guy wins on every single route, which if you pop on the tape, you could see most of the time. It's there for you to see as well. But the context of how many times he ran the route is needed. Do you have anything that you want to touch on real quick before we?
Yeah, so that's the big thing for me. And if you look at Deebo's 2019 to 2020, I know we're going to talk about Deebo in a bit, but you see how that sample size really changes things, because like Deebo's corner route was green in 19, and in 2020 it becomes red. Deebo's post was green in 19, it becomes red in 2020. And I wouldn't say that's because Deebo became worse at either of those routes. I just think he ran them against less favorable looks, and maybe he had 2 bad post routes or something like that, and it just ruined the percentage. So that would be the one thing. Overall, though, I think the film does bear out with Aiyuk. Like, I think the big thing that we don't get to see with Aiyuk is larger percentages of these more outside-driven routes that the more physically gifted receivers in the NFL runs, right? Like the best receivers in the NFL, the Tyreek Hills, the DK Metcalfs, the Mike Evans, the DeAndre Hopkins, these guys win on 9 routes. They win on corner routes. They win on comeback routes because those are what the truly special guys outside the numbers do, because they win with their physical ability, and then they win with their route running. The Devontae Adams, all these guys. So that's where I feel like I would love to see the sample size a bit more with Aiyuk, because digs, slants, all of those things, especially when you play in an offense that's predicated on play action, the space gets opened up for you a lot easier, and it is easier to create separation. So that's where with Aiyuk, I would like to just see one more year of sample size, because the film bears out that he can actually do all of those things, and he can do them at a high level. We just don't get to see them because of the way the 49ers structure their offense, and because who was under center at quarterback and how it didn't fit to their strengths. So I would say that would be the only thing that I might have maybe a little reservations about, because, a 9 route that was one more bad 9 route could have changed this entire exercise, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. And it's all about the percentages and everything. So real quick, just to finish up, flat routes, 69%, 69.2%. That's nice. 84.9% with slants, 100% on screens. But again, screens are for the most part open. One of those counts as the screen pass against Philly where he jumped over somebody. That's an absolute screen, the tunnel screen from Nick Mullins. And then 57.1% on the other routes. So real quick, just to comb through, the actual article as well. The 49ers primarily deployed him as an outside receiver 78.9% of the time, and he took 70.8% of his snaps while on the line of scrimmage. Clear-cut X receiver on this team. And I think that, again, the film bears that out. You see that all the time as well, too. But here's the part that I was walking away impressed with. I know that he can win on those routes, and obviously that's why Kyle Shanahan really wanted to get his hands on him. But against straight-up man, 40% of his routes, he had a 75.7% success rate, which is 88th percentile. So if you want to know how percentiles work, the higher the number of the percentile, the better the actual grade is, okay? You don't want to be in the first percentile. You want to be in the 99th. You want to be in the 100th percentile. You want to be up there. So against zone, 59.8% with a 77.8% success rate, which is only good for 47th percentile. But I wanted to touch on that real quick because it seemed to me like last year, the 49ers faced a ton of zone, especially when you look at when we get to Deebo's portion, they weren't manning up the 49ers. Why do you think that is, Vish?
I actually think that's interesting because when I think about it, it's like I look at the Niners receiver, I look at who they have under center. I would think playing very physical press man coverage would be the way to go because who's really scaring you of beating you over the top? Maybe Aiyuk scares you, but the quarterback's not getting the ball to him if he's really beating you over the top. So that's really interesting. In terms of why they saw more zone coverage, honestly, it goes to the run game. I think that because the run game is so complicated and I guess it can help you stop the run in certain looks and certain fits, but even I feel like it less complicates your job if you just say you got this guy, he's got this guy, you got this guy, because Shanahan's so good with motion and all of that. So I think this is actually a question I don't have a great answer to because I don't actually have a good understanding of why you would zone up against the 49ers so much, especially last year when you had Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard playing quarterback for a grand majority of their games. But I can kind of see why, in terms of Brandon Aiyuk, why he's just better at running routes against man instead of zone, because he was a first-year player. He might not, feel space as well. Like Emmanuel Sanders was unbelievable at finding space within zone and all of that, and he still is, but that's just because he's a guy that's been around for 10 years and has been phenomenal at route running for 10 years. I think Aiyuk will get there. It's just, it makes more sense for him to just beat the guy in front of him at this point.
Well, thank you for saying that, because the reason that I pressed the question onto you is because I didn't have a good answer either, honestly, for why. Because I have those same sort of thoughts. Aside from Aiyuk, who are you really worried about beating you man down the field, honestly? And remember, how long was Aiyuk on the shelf? And you don't know what you're getting from Aiyuk. Just because he showed up and he was the man day one in the Giants game doesn't mean that that's what you should expect. So that's a really good question. And I think that's what makes it so interesting, is because now that I have all of these numbers, I want to go back now and I want to look. I want to look at least on the film and see what I think I see and what I think the defenses were trying to do in order to take away whatever it is that they were afraid of. And the play action has a lot to do with that as well, too. I don't know if zone is easier for you to sit there so you can stop the run or maybe uncomplicate people's tasks, but isn't it easier, like you said, to just say, that's your guy, this is your guy, just go stay with them. So real quick, just to finish up on Brandon Aiyuk, press coverage, 23% of the time, 77.6 success rate. That is really impressive, honestly. 86th percentile, but go ahead, go for it.
I had two things, and I did want to touch on this point. My fault for interrupting.
You're good.
One thing, I think I have an answer for the zone question. I think it's because you just got to look at who the Niners played. Teams, especially most defenses, aren't the New England Patriots where, we're going to be a quarters team in the Super Bowl after we've been a man pattern matching year the entire season. They don't do stuff like that. They are who they are. You play a Seattle. Seattle primarily plays cover 3. That's the Seattle scheme. They played a
Yep.
little more split safety coverage last year. They're a team that plays primary zone. They played the NFC East. Dallas is a zone team. Washington's a zone team. Philly's the only team that played a decent amount of man coverage. The Giants play a mixture of both, but they played a lot of teams whose primary coverage and primary way of playing is zone coverage. So I think that's why maybe the numbers, he's just faced a little more zone because teams are going to do what they do on defense. And then in regards to the press, I actually didn't watch a lot of Brandon Aiyuk coming out of college, but I do remember reading that a lot of people thought the one weakness per se in Brandon Ayuk's game was they weren't sure about his ability to get off press and when corners are physical against him. So I think that's a very important thing to look at and be like, wow, Aiyuk was so good against press last year, and he played guys like Tre'Davious White, who's one of the best corners at the line of scrimmage in the NFL, and he had his way. So all of those things, when you look at it, it's all really positive, and it should make you very, very excited about what Brandon Aiyuk could be. Maybe limit the expectations a little bit because I've been seeing stuff like he could be the best receiver in the NFL, which I maybe he could be, not saying he can't be. I just think it's not very, likely. Very bold expectation to have on him at this point. But He could certainly be a top 10 receiver in the NFL. He's that talented.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So basically, to put a bow on Brandon Aiyuk and what Matt Harmon believes about him, he's been doing reception perception for years now. This is a staple of his. Some of his favorite receivers are Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, all guys who have shown that they can win at each level in this game in almost any route. And he has them in that tier. He has Brandon Aiyuk in that tier for 1 year of charting because of his success rate. So listen, if you want to say that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be one of the best receivers in the game, that's fine. Best receiver in the game, let's wait. Let's see what happens. Let's pull it back about that one.
Right. And one of the things with reception perception, right? Calvin Ridley is an all-around fabulous wide receiver. Wins at all three levels, outstanding route runner. I think he's a better version of what Jerry Jeudy could be and all of that. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody views Calvin Ridley as even a top 5 receiver in football. A guy like A.J. Brown, who wins primarily on in-breaking routes. I'm sure especially A.J. Brown's charting from 2019. I haven't actually even looked at it, but I watched a lot of A.J. Brown in 2019. And I know this, I could guess this for a fact that he's green on all in-breaking routes, and the percentages on out-breaking routes, on his wins on out-breaking routes and routes that break, and routes like 9 routes and stuff, isn't that great for a guy of his caliber. But A.J. Brown's a top 6, 7 receiver, 8 receiver in football because he's so physically gifted and the things he can do with the ball in his hands and all of that. So that's where I just continue to say this charting, while it's a good exercise to know which receivers are all around, being an all-around receiver isn't the end-all be-all to be the best receiver in the NFL.
Absolutely. So I want you to take the floor with Deebo. Talk to me. First of all, can you talk to the people who maybe didn't know the book on Deebo Samuel before the Senior Bowl? Because a lot of people were introduced to Deebo Samuel by the Senior Bowl when Kyle Shanahan was there. And eventually he became the 49ers wide receiver. But I feel like a lot of people are surprised at the way Deebo Samuel has been used or has been working in the NFL. But I don't know if that kind of in line with what people said about him. So go ahead, Vish.
Yeah, this is kind of who he was. His comp in college coming out was Golden Tate meets Anquan Boldin, because his body's Anquan Boldin, his play style is Golden Tate. So he is exactly as advertised. I think one of the things that shocked people in the Senior Bowl was how good he was at the line of scrimmage. He busted Rock Ya-Sin's chops in the Senior Bowl. He actually just whooped Rock Ya-Sin. And Rock Ya-Sin was picked 34 overall by everybody's favorite GM, Chris Ballard. And Deebo was 34th. I think Rock Ya-Sin was 33rd. Or Deebo was 35th or 36th. That's my fault. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure on that. But Deebo destroyed him. He destroyed him in that Senior Bowl. And so, I think a lot of people expected maybe Deebo to be this what Aiyuk is, a 3-level receiver that wins up the field. But if you remember when they drafted him, at the time they had Pettis. Pettis was supposed to be what Aiyuk is. Pettis was supposed to be the guy that can win down the field, can win intermediate, can win short. And Deebo was supposed to be kind of a do-it-all that can win in man coverage, but you don't want him to just line up outside in one spot because he does so many other things where you want to move him around. You want to get him involved in the run game. I do think with Deebo in the NFL, it's become a little overdone. Like you look at his route percentages from 2020 and you see flat at 90%, you see slant at 83%, you see dig at 82%. Like, I don't think Deebo Samuel needs to be, or excuse me, those are his win rates. Slant, his route percentage was 19.8% slant, 18.1% screen, 12.4% dig. So still those were his primary routes, and those were routes
I have a question, Vish. I think other does I don't know what those push passes are considered. Is that other, like, you know, with him in motion is I don't know what that is.
I think that's the other, but then I saw that only at 2.8%.
2.8%, that's not true. Yeah, that's
right.
No.
Right.
That's not
so
it.
I don't know where they're charting that, because Deebo probably has, if Deebo has 10 targets in a game, 2 of those are those push passes, and that's already 20% of his targets. So that doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know where those come into play, but I think the one thing that I push back on, like, is Deebo a true, like, Stephon Diggs, Brandon Aiyuk type receiver? No. But is he this 100% where you have to just get him the ball and push passes, slants, the occasional dig off an RPO or play action or something like that? I would push back and say no, because I think there's more to Deebo as a receiver that we just haven't been able to unlock yet. I'm not saying that more means he's going to be a top 10 receiver in the NFL as just a true receiver. He might be a top 10 football player at the receiver position, but that's a different thing. The thing is, like, I've seen Deebo Samuel run by Shaq Griffin, who runs a 4.38 straight down the field as a 9 route with just pure speed.
And talk about it. In week 17, I watched Deebo Samuel work down the field on these throws. So I'm 100% in agreement with you, Vish, that yes, okay, this may be his game, but I feel like Deebo is so much more. One more point I wanted to touch on before I didn't mean to cut you off real quick. Mm-hmm. I was on a pod with Croc, and we were talking about Justin Jefferson, and he asked me, you know who remind me of Justin Jefferson in the way he ran routes? And I said Dante Pettis, and he was like, yes, absolutely, 100%. A lot of arms, a lot of legs, the way that he moves a little bit. So look, obviously we're not trying to say that, but that's the thought process with Kyle Shanahan, right? Like, it was the idea of, okay, we're going to bring in Deebo to be this X factor kind of guy, while we have a guy who can win it all through. That's what he thought he had with Dante Pettis. But
I think what people don't understand is, like, this is one of the bigger blunders of this regime. Like, yeah, they nailed the Aiyuk pick, or it seems to be trending this way, but they gave up 2 picks to go get Dante Pettis, and because Dante Pettis flopped, they gave up 2 picks to get Emmanuel Sanders and 3 picks to get Brandon Aiyuk. That has to be remembered, that Dante Pettis cost this team 10 draft picks. Think about that. You finally succeeded with Aiyuk, but 10 draft picks have been caused by the Dante Pettis miss.
Tweet that out, Vish, because that's some bars right there, honestly, when it comes to that. But again, it's all right. So Deebo Samuel's contributions to this team shouldn't be diminished for his role, okay? And at the same time, you can say that while saying Deebo Samuel could do more. I do not subscribe to this idea that Deebo Samuel is a straight up gadget player. I do not subscribe to that. Just because you use him that way and he's successful in that way because he's great with the ball in his hands, and that's something that we all knew, doesn't mean that that's all he is. And I don't want to get into it, but I think there's a little bit more that is subscribing to that or making that happen than his own route running.
Sure. Look, does his route running need to improve? Yeah, he's not the most technically refined route runner, but he's actually a very fluid athlete for a guy his size, and a very explosive athlete. I was talking to Grant about this earlier, actually. He's one of the more freaky athletes on the 49ers. 225-pound people aren't supposed to be as explosive and fluid as he is. That's part of the reason why he has hamstring problems. Like, dare I say, there's a little bit of Zion Williamson working here, where he's a naturally huge guy that's really, really explosive, like that amount of torque in that body. This is when Deebo gets moving, I wouldn't be surprised if you put the GPS in Deebo's at 20.9, 21 miles per hour. Because
I don't want to tackle Deebo Samuel. I don't want to tackle Deebo Samuel in the open field. I don't want to tackle him. So
yeah, but there are things that limit Deebo, right? The short arms, that's a problem because his catch radius is limited. But then you look at Deebo in South Carolina, one of the things that Deebo was actually special at was contested catches. he has really big hands. He has 10-inch hands, and he has no problem gripping the football away from his body. So that's something he can do. But I think overall, what I would say is like, yeah, these percentages that Matt Harmon posts the last 2 years are a little jarring. And is Deebo ever going to have a wheel that looks like Aiyuk's? No way. But can his wheel look a lot better? I would say yes. If you increase the sample size, I think that he is a guy that could get better against press coverage. I just think he needs to see more press coverage in his career, which if you looked at both the stats for Deebo and Aiyuk, they didn't see enough press to even be placed in a specific percentile because the sample size was too small. So you can't even say how good they are against press, though. I would say that I think it's something Deebo does need to work on. But overall with Deebo, I just think there's too many glimpses that we've seen, like him beating good corners just down the field, like I go back to the Saints game, the play before the Kittle play when Garoppolo throws it. Right, he throws it to Emmanuel Sanders with the rat defender there. I want to say he beat, I forgot who their number 2 corner at the time was, but he beat Eli Apple.
Eli Apple.
He beat Eli Apple with just straight explosiveness, and Eli Apple is an explosive athlete. So this guy is capable of being like a legitimate number 2, just pure wide receiver. I think as a pure wide receiver, if he didn't have all this after the catch stuff and all this value with that, he could be a big time number 2 receiver in the NFL.
So what I'm going to say is this, today, before we get into that, and I want you to start with Deebo's chart from 2019 so we can compare and contrast, because obviously 2020 is riddled with injuries and that context can't be lost in this discussion. But Rich Madrid today posted a thread, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about with this methodology and what is considered being open. So there's a play in the thread at the end where it's the Ravens game. Obviously, Deebo Samuel caught a contested catch for a touchdown early in that game. There's a play where Jimmy Garoppolo is in the pocket, feels a little something. Deebo runs past his defender because it's cover 3, and the guy and his defender is in the flat. When Jimmy steps up in the pocket and goes to move up, Deebo Samuel's by himself, and all you have to do is flick the ball in his direction. That's how open he is, and Jimmy winds up taking the sack. So again, all of this methodology with was he open on this route? So technically it was a 9 route because he ran straight, but was it a 9 route in the concept? I don't know if that's the case. Again, he started to lead towards a 9, but the play breaks down so quickly, and all of a sudden Jimmy Garoppolo is in a defender's grasp. That was the call for him to be a straight 9. Was it for him to maybe an over dig? That's a little bit of a deeper route, and then maybe cut across the middle. So again, all of that stuff. Again, these points that we're bringing up, these percentages, they have to be cross-referenced with the film. And I'm not knocking Matt Harmon because I love this stuff. Honestly, I love it. I think that one thing that I'm going to say is my obsession with fantasy football has led me to understanding way more than I ever thought I would ever understand in terms of concepts, how plays are called, play callers, how guys win. And people want to knock fantasy football people all the time. I have a better understanding of everybody's roster and what teams are trying to do because of fantasy football. As long as you use it in the right way, you can learn a bunch of things. Much of what I've learned about football, schemes, all those things has come from fantasy football, okay? But at the same time, just one person's way of looking at it shouldn't be the end-all be-all, like you said in the beginning. So again, I almost want to, like, after this is over and we get a chance to chill for a little bit, I almost want to show you this play just so I could show you, like, real quick what I'm talking about. But
I went through the thread real quick. I didn't see that final play because I saw this one. He was talking about Ravens split safety cover 7. So I actually have learned
he showed
split
that
safety cover 7. So I was watching that, trying to remember if I knew the rules for box.
Right. When you get down to that last one, check that one out. And we have a donation real quick. P. North, thank you, bro, for the donation. I appreciate you. Does Deebo have a problem catching sometimes? I'll let you start, Vish.
So I think this is it's a thing with what Kyle Shanahan touched on, right? When he talked about Kendrick Bourne last offseason, there's a difference between dropping passes and having good hands. I think Deebo has excellent hands. I mean, he has great hand-eye coordination. I talk about a big 10-inch hands. We've seen him make some very difficult catches in tight spaces. I think it's just concentration drops of he runs because he does not slow down when he's catching the football, especially on these digs. Like the Packers touchdown on Sunday Night Football, like that touchdown is made by the fact that Garoppolo literally puts that's such an accurate throw,
Right
given how fast Deebo is moving across the field.
Right in the
and
spot.
Deebo doesn't lose speed. And because Deebo is so fast, he outruns the safety angle. It's a walk-in touchdown. But Deebo doesn't lose speed, so I feel like that's where, he's thinking about what he's going to do, and it might be a little bit of a concentration drop. But I thought it was actually cleaned up a little bit in the short time we got to see him in 2020. And so I think with Deebo also, like he talked about it, he had a lot of thinking to do with the offense, and the offense only clicked for him late in 2019. So I wonder if thinking about what exact route he has to run and all of that, those type things also had something to do with just him having more drops than maybe someone of his hands should have.
Awesome. So do you want to start with the 2019 charts? So you can talk through them real quick, and then we'll move to 2020. Obviously 2020 was marred with injuries, so that's not something that people want to remember. Let's talk about the good stuff. Talk about 2019 and Deebo Samuel for me.
Yeah, 2019 Deebo Samuel, to me, it's a very interesting chart because the one first thing that stands out to me is that he ran more 9 routes according to Matt Harmon than Diggs. He ran 16.8% of his routes to be 9 routes, and he ran 13.6% of his routes to be Diggs. That's a shocking thing for me because I watched a lot of Deebo Samuel in 2019 watching the Niners offense. In-breaking routes were really primarily where they used Deebo Samuel if he was lined up as the X or the Z receiver. So that I'm shocked because, one, the Niners don't run a lot of 9 routes in general unless a player is clearing out. So then I have to go back, and this is something I'm going to have to do at some point because now I'm curious about this and see if in the concept Deebo was a clear out or something like that, because that's a little shocking to me that he was at 16.8%. In terms of his win rates, again, this goes back to the Aiyuk thing, right? An 80% win rate on posts that he ran 4% of the time. You will see this number change when we go through his 2020. But I think the thing with that is Deebo Samuel a really great runner of the post route, or did they just have a small sample size and he succeeded in that small sample size? Well, that's subject to debate, but I would tend to agree with he's pretty good at running the post route. They don't run a lot of it, and he got to run it against favorable looks when he did run it. So therefore, that's why it looks the way that it does. And then in terms of everything else, I mean, everything else looks pretty normal to me. Like Deebo Samuel running only 6.4% of out routes. That makes sense. He only ran 6% corners, which was a little interesting to me, but he won 66.7% of the time on corners, which goes back to you, especially talking about that week 17 game against Seattle. I mean, everybody remembers Garoppolo stepping up in the pocket, shading a little bit right, and flicking that 19-yard corner route to Deebo Samuel, and he spinned Shaq Griffin like a top. He worked him on that play. And so overall, I don't think I'm shocked by any of Deebo's numbers, except for one thing, and it goes to the man zone percentages. I was shocked that Deebo Samuel had an 85% success rate, putting him in the 90th percentile against zone coverage.
That's impressive. That really is impressive. Because when you think about it, and when you think about it, like you said, Emmanuel Sanders finds space because he understands what he's seeing. Okay, you know when it's time to sit down the route, and that has to do with your chemistry with the quarterback as well too. So for Deebo Samuel to see that many zone looks at 36%, for him to have an 85.6% success rate speaks to his mind a little bit more, in my opinion, than anything.
Yeah, it does. But then the one thing I would push back on and say, like, how many times did the concept in front of him see zone, and how many times do we see Deebo, come in jet motion, and then he's basically the alert on the bubble. So if the quarterback doesn't want to sees a numbers advantage on the outside, he can pull out of the stretch zone, and it's kind of an RPO to the bubble, but it's more of an alert than anything. And, he pulls it out of the belly and just flicks it out to Deebo. I wouldn't even call it, it's technically kind of a bubble screen, but I wouldn't even call it a screen because it's based on numbers. If it's 2-on-1 or if it's 2-on-2, you just get the ball to Deebo. That's hilarious.
I'm sorry, I had to pull that up. My bad. But keep going.
Dude, that honestly, like, full disclosure, that's the most shocked I've ever been on his stream. Like, I love
Absolutely.
Grant. I had no idea he would go there. He just suddenly goes, Deebo had to. And I was like, whoa.
No, honestly, look, you're absolutely right. When you look at week 17, there's plays where off the line of scrimmage, he has to immediately beat his guy and catch a short slant from Garoppolo. But then you talk about that Shaq Griffin play, and that's the one that I always keep looking at because I detailed it in the thread. I can't remember off the top of my head what the concept was, but I just remember him destroying Shaq Griffin, and it was a post, a corner route. You know, I believe no, it was a post. It was a post to the sideline, and he had to slow down and stop to catch it like here. Like he wasn't catching it here to move and turn up
with the football. He took an extra hitch,
but he was wide open to the fact that it was enough where you could still throw it to him. He still caught it and turned and got extra yards. But if you put that ball on time to him there, it's probably a touchdown. Probably just walks right into the end zone.
And that was like 39 or 38. That was a big third down in the game.
Play.
Yeah.
Very big play.
I just keep going back to it with Deebo, man. I understand how the chart looks. I understand how the percentages look. But I also know that my study of watching Deebo has made me more optimistic on the routes that this chart says he's not good at to be like, okay, there can be more with Deebo. I do think again, it comes down to there is nuance with Deebo, right? He will never have a chart like a Calvin Ridley or a Stephon Diggs or what Aiyuk had. But at the same time, there's no reason to not feel optimistic that if you look at the current 49ers and you say Kittle's the first receiving option, and if you want to put Aiyuk in the drop back passing game as a second receiving option, there's no reason to say you couldn't put Deebo in the slot and he could beat somebody on, you know, an option route or a jerk route or something like that. Because it comes down to projection, right? Like DK Metcalf ran 3 routes in college because that's how their offense was. But people like Kroc had the foresight to say, no. If you look at his body, he has the ability to run all these routes. And now I posted a clip to some fan who said DK Metcalf can't run routes of DK Metcalf running a blaze out, which is a notoriously difficult route, a route that Julio Jones mastered, and beating Jason Verrett, who we all agree is a top 10 corner on it. So that just goes to show. And that's where I look at Deebo. I look at his body. I look at his explosiveness. I look at his fluidity. I look at his ability to change direction and all of those things. And I say, why the hell not could Deebo Samuel not be much better in terms of this chart?
Absolutely. So let's talk about, do you want to get into 2020?
Let's get into 2020.
Yeah. Do you have that pulled up on you? Or
I do have it pulled up.
All right. So
I
go
do
for
have
it.
it pulled up.
Go for it.
So, I mean, I can break down the percentages with you because this chart with Deebo in 2020 is a little ugly. So I actually want to first get your take on just the reasoning on why you feel the way you feel on this. But let's start off. I mean, we can start off with the 9 route, right? He ran it 39% of the time for a success of 39.1%. Not great. Post, 7.9% of the time. So that increased, which is kind of shocking to me because I don't actually remember that many times Deebo Samuel running deeper posts within a concept. I don't remember that a lot.
I remember how many games did Deebo play this year? 5?
Did he play 5 or 6?
6? Yeah, something like that. 5 or 6.
Yeah, so but he had a success of 57.1% on those posts. Diggs, his best route when he was in college too, 12.4% of the time he ran it, 81.6% success. Corner, he ran 5.1% of the time, 55.6% success. Out route, he ran 4% of the time, 57.1% success. Comeback, he ran 2.3% of the time, which is actually shocking to me. Because that's a route you don't see a lot from Niners receivers in general, and that's a route none of the Niners quarterbacks that were rostered last year capable of throwing, especially a deeper comeback and driving that ball like that. And he had a 50% success rate. But then you go to slant, right? He ran it 19.8% of the time, 83% success rate. He had a 5.6% routes of run in the flat, and he had a 90% success rate on those. Screen, he ran 100% of the time, he ran 18.1% of the time he ran screens, and he had a 100% success rate. And then finally, and this is where the other is once again interesting, because he ran other only 2.8% of the time, and he only had a 20% success rate. And I swear to God, that push pass to Deebo Samuel, I don't know where he's charted it, but that push pass has like a 95% success rate.
Easily. There's no way that it's just 2.8. Also, one thing that I wanted to touch on in 2019, if you go back to the second Arizona game, there was Deebo Samuel going up against the other Peterson, not Patrick, just in case. I thought I saw that in the comments. Not Patrick Peterson. Kevin Peterson, where Jimmy throws the ball up and a contested catch, and he catches the ball behind him and brings it in. I think that guy is still there. But there was a route in that game where he cooks Patrick Peterson. And Patrick Peterson literally has to try to grab him at the middle of the route. And Deebo still is able to run that post route towards the sideline, and Jimmy puts the ball right on him. So, again, I don't want to go back to 2019.
That was a big third down. That was a hell of an anticipatory throw because he threw it before he came out of his break in a muddled pocket. So it was good quarterback play, and it was a hell of a route from Deebo. And I actually thought, I love that you brought up that game because I was going to bring it up. I thought that was Deebo's best game of 2019. That's his best game of the season. True receiver, because Kittle was out, and Emmanuel Sanders had the broken ribs, so he was kind of playing but not really playing. And they legitimately had Deebo play as their number one receiver, and he had like 8 catches for 135 yards. Like they ran a couple screens at the end, but he was winning routes 15, 20 yards, 10 to 15 yards down the field. Yeah.
Downfield. Matter of fact, once we're done here, I'll retweet my thread of that game of all of Deebo's catches, and you can watch him winning down the field. You can watch him beating people off routes. So again, this is just one piece of the puzzle when we're talking about this. We're not talking about this being the end-all be-all because we've seen him do this. And again, Jimmy Garoppolo was at his best state in 2019. Obviously, this team was at his best state. So all those things need to be factored in. And when you ask me real quick about 2020, what's the difference? Well, obviously the injuries play a part. We don't have to talk about that. Quarterback play has to be part of this conversation. Look, say what you want about Nick Mullins being the smartest in the room. Executing on the field and being the smartest in a film room is two different things. And CJ Beathard being there more than anything. We even got a little bit of Jerick McKinnon playing quarterback one.
You were excited about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the best play call in the world. It would have worked. If Jerick pulls that out real quicker, he probably has that outside lane. Anyway, but yeah, honestly, with Deebo Samuel, I feel like, again, these charts are great. They're good for reference points as far as an overall point. But I feel like I see more that Deebo can do because I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it in bigger games, in big games. Now, everybody wants to go right back to the Super Bowl, right? In the Super Bowl, what did Deebo Samuel do? He was killing the Chiefs with the jet sweep, killing them because he profiles as a running back who plays wide receiver with the ball in his hands. And that stuff shouldn't be lost when you talk about Deebo Samuel. That's not the stuff that you just gloss over. That's part of your evaluation of Deebo Samuel and why this team went ahead and drafted him. So I just want to make sure that all that stuff isn't lost when we talk about it. Clearly, injuries has something to do with 2020, but clearly quarterback play and who was there and the way this team was executing, honestly, across the board for everybody, has to be part of 2020's story with Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, 100%. I think the only things that really, really shocked me, and I haven't gone back and watched 2020 Deebo Samuel specifically, maybe that's something I'll do now in my summer, is that the fifth percentile with the 50%, not even 50, it was worse than that. I think with 50.8 win percentage success rate versus man, that needs to get a lot better. But then if Deebo saw Jalen Ramsey in the two Rams games, this is 2020, yeah, right. But if Deebo saw Jalen Ramsey in the two Rams games, that they played, then and he played both those Rams games, and now he's played 5 games. Like, I don't blame Deebo for not beating Jalen Ramsey. 98% of receivers are not beating Jalen Ramsey in a game. So
also what you said about the nuance is important because in the Jimmy Garoppolo first Rams game, Jalen Ramsey was on George Kittle trying to guard him.
He was everywhere.
Right. He wasn't trying to guard Deebo Samuel. So that's the thing, is that Jalen Ramsey was going to whatever concept they thought that they were seeing on the field and the number one on that concept. Because remember, reads aren't simply, okay, Brandon Aiyuk's on the field, then he's the number one read. Or George Kittle's on the field, he's the number one read. No, that's not the concept. That's not how that works. Sometimes it's concepts are inside out, outside in, and that depends. But Jalen Ramsey and the Rams understood all that, and they went. Remember, George Kittle scores that touchdown on that 4th down on Jalen Ramsey. That was on Jalen Ramsey. So he wasn't guarding Deebo. He wasn't guarding Aiyuk on that play. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. I agree with that. My point was I haven't gone back and watched the game from this angle, and I probably will. Because this is charting all of Deebo's routes, right? I want to look at their drop back pass situations and see where Ramsey was. Because if Ramsey was on Deebo, and you can look at both the games and say Ramsey's on Deebo on these specific drop back pass situations, and Deebo only played 6 games last year, 5 games, or whatever the number was, then his stats make a lot more sense, right? Because, of course, his man coverage stats are going to be poor. Of course, his press coverage stats are going to be poor because he has 2 large sample sizes in an already small sample size that skew his stats, right? Because, again, Ramsey is the best corner in the NFL. I don't know why I see so many Niners fans just resisting this fact.
It's because Darnell Mooney cooked him on a
double move. I saw that
on a double move, right? Jalen Ramsey's been fuming about that on social media about it too as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's
a little sluggo. I saw that, but I saw Croc tweeting about it, and he put it into context a bit more. Like it was 3rd and 5. Of course, he was going to jump the underneath.
I mean, you get there, you jump the route, yeah, absolutely. And it's Nick Foles at quarterback. Nick Foles isn't going to throw and it was an incompletion.
It's one route.
Right.
It's one route. I can show you so many routes of Jalen Ramsey covering like Mike Evans
or DK
Metcalf and just absolutely shutting them down. And these are elite football players. So, I mean, I don't know why people resist that fact. But the point I'm trying to say with Ramsey is that, of course, he's going to skew Deebo's stats if, Deebo ran 12 routes in a drop back pass situation in the first Rams game, and he saw Ramsey for 6 of them. Then his press percentage getting off press is probably going to be worse than what you expected, and his percentage of routes won against man are probably going to be worse than what you expected, just because I doubt he wins. I think he would go 1 for 6 in those, if we're being nice.
Yeah, against Jalen Ramsey, 1 for 6 is really great. Honestly, if you do anything more than that, then you're completely
Tyreek Hill.
Right, you're blowing past expectations. Real quick, this is another thing I wanted to point out. Matt Harmon does a really good job of contextualizing the entire Deebo Samuel discussion by saying Samuel ran a slant or a screen on 37.9% of his sample routes. The name of the game was with Samuel is clear. Manufacture space for him in the open field and let him go to work. It makes sense. While he's not a traditional separator, he's one of the most dangerous receivers after the catch. Samuel was in space on 16.4% of his routes, highest among all 2020 charted players in 5 games, highest, and broke multiple tackles on 20.7% of his plays. That is the part that really jumped out to me, honestly, especially when you talk about him only playing 6 games.
Yeah, that I think that's so important because I've gotten into arguments about this. I think you and I have had a discussion. I wouldn't even really call it an argument because the people who I've had the discussion with, I don't really argue with. They're my friends. Yeah. So people like you, Grant. But I still think Deebo is a better football player than Brandon Aiyuk. And these are the things that go into him being a football player.
Talk about it.
If you want to talk about pure wide receiver and pure technique and technicalities of the receiver position, obviously Aiyuk is the better player. But what Deebo does and the things Deebo does for this offense, there's no other player in football that can do these things. That's why when Deebo's on this offense, the run game works. When Deebo's healthy and playing for this offense, everything works because the physical element Deebo adds, the ability to break tackles, the ability to manufacture stats for quarterbacks and all of that, those things to me change the entire game. And that's why I think as an individual football player, you could make the argument, honestly, if he has another healthy season, that Deebo is one of the 10 best football players playing at the receiver position. He's not one of the 10 best receivers. He might never be in that. But as a football player at the receiver position, when you take into account his ability after the catch, his ability to turn plays that should go for minimal gains into something big, his ability to inspire and bring energy to a team into the game, his ability to, run the football, his ability, the fear. I think Tyreek Hill is the only other player that creates the level of fear when they go in motion, whether it's jet, whether it's orbit, that Deebo Samuel creates. So when you look at all of those things, I think you can make an argument for how special Deebo is as a football player, and that's why he's my favorite football player.
One more thing, too, is for, because we have to wrap this up real quick. Vish, thank you, man. This was a great discussion. Honestly, I think that all of these points are great, and I think that we're going to have more discussions as the offseason goes along, especially when we start to get into preseason and we start to see guys and we start to figure out
things actually happen.
Correct. Yeah, we're right now on June 7th. We're grasping at straws right now to come up with content. But think about this point of view, 49er fans. Trey Lance is in shotgun. The ball comes to him. Deebo Samuel's coming across. He puts the ball in Raheem Mostert's belly. Being a linebacker and watching all of that happen with Trey Lance having that ability to run with the ball, you are challenging all four principles. If you thought it was hard to figure out this run game when it was Jimmy Garoppolo running those RPOs with the jet sweep, because they didn't just run it with Deebo Samuel. They just knew that Deebo Samuel's more effective at it, and if he got his hands on the ball, you're in trouble. Point of view as a linebacker, Trey Lance has the ball. It's in the belly of Raheem Mostert. Deebo Samuel's running by. Good luck. Godspeed, because you're going to be standing there flat-footed, waiting. And once you react to who you figure out has the ball, he's already by you. Doesn't matter if it's Mostert. Doesn't matter if it's Deebo. Doesn't matter if it's Trey Sermon. Doesn't matter if it's Lance. By the time you figure out what has happened with what Deebo Samuel is doing by coming across, it's too late. And that's what this league should be expecting going forward.
Yeah, this run game should make people be scared. I don't want to cuss and ruin your monetization. So
you're good. You can curse once or twice. They told us, they were like, hey, you just got to let us know if you cursed an exorbitant amount. But we don't do that. So yeah.
They should be scared shitless.
That's it. Agreed. I mean, if you're a linebacker, remember, think about 2019. This is the last point I'll make before we go. And again, Vish, thank you, man, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Man. Of course, it's always an honor to be on with.
No, I can't believe that. I can't believe that I got Vish Kumaran to join my stream more than anything. This guy. Everybody started DMing me like, "How did you get this?" And I was just like, "Hey, man, we working out here real quick." But hey, look.
Oh, really?
I'll point to this. I'll point to the Carolina game. Okay, Luke Kuechly, who is the most maniacal worker and the most film-based linebacker in the league, one Hall of Famer, hands down. That Panthers team was flummoxed with how they could figure out who had the ball. And I always go back to the RPO of, the one RPO that I always look to is the 3 technique is always left unblocked, always. And it's an RPO. The jet sweep comes. You put the ball in the belly. If you want to pull that out and throw it to the flat to Dante Pettis, he's open. If you want to hand it to Coleman, you can. Remember, Tevin Coleman scored 4 touchdowns against the Carolina Panthers. It's not because Tevin Coleman is some world beater. It's because the scheme, right? And Deebo Samuel scores on a play where it's the inside handoff, but then they show that on tape with Carolina, and then they take it and they show it to you again with the same formation in New Orleans, and it turns into Emmanuel Sanders getting the ball pitched back to him and throwing the ball down the field. I think that's the portion that people really don't understand about the impact. One more question we'll take before we go. Pinor, thank you, man. I appreciate, again, the contribution. Aiyuk is a true receiver. Deebo is a true playmaker. That's the difference. And thanks for cursing, Vish. Chat is soft, and we need to more and we need to be more corporate. I mean, I agree, honestly. So again, when you evaluating football players, if you want to talk about route runners, right? Like what's the best example that I can give you of who's a better route runner than somebody who's an actual better football player? At the receiver position,
Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore.
Perfect. Who would you say is the better route runner of the two?
Calvin Ridley.
Who's the better football player?
DJ Moore. Jerry Jeudy versus like 7 receivers from the 20 draft class. Same thing.
I agree, honestly. And all that stuff is going to, DJ Moore, I don't want to get into this. And you and I need to probably get on the stream just so we could talk about DJ Moore, because he is the most slept on receiver in this world. 23 years old, has 1,000 yards every year. The first year, his quarterback was Kyle Allen. Last year it was Teddy. And if we went back and watched the film, there were plays that were left completely on the field. DJ Moore led the league in yards per reception. And that includes Justin Jefferson, who set the rookie record. That includes guys that were breaking records during the season, 18.9 per. And DJ Moore still is not getting the respect that he did. He's a free agent next year. I will be full on press the gas. If DJ Moore's out there and the 49ers don't go and get him, I don't understand what the thought
I will be so upset. They didn't take his 5th-year option. Carolina?
Not yet. They will probably. I'm just saying that, thank you, Mariah, for the contribution as well. We appreciate you. But yeah,
hasn't the deadline passed for the 5th-year option?
Looks like he's a free agent then. That's what I was thinking. So people were going down the list of Allen Robinson's a free agent next year. DJ Moore's a free agent next year. There's so many receivers that you look at that are guys that we consider top 15, top 20 that will be available next year. DJ Moore is 23 years old. He'll be 24 this year. If the 49ers have a chance to go out and get a receiver, I don't see how it's not DJ Moore and how you don't look at him immediately as the guy that you throw money to. But that's another conversation for a whole other day. But you're absolutely right about the description. Calvin Ridley's a better route runner. DJ Moore's a better football player. There are two different discussions, and I think that's what we talk about with Aiyuk and Samuel. So you're absolutely right about that. Vish, before we go, man, let everybody know what's going on with you this week, what you got going on, any streams that you have happening, anything that you're working on.
But yeah, I mean, Blake and Vish Sports will just be streaming whenever we think of some topics. So we'll be streaming sometime this week. Just peep my Twitter. If we come up with something, we'll be streaming sometime soon, probably a Wednesday, probably a Thursday. Just keep an eye. We've obviously been streaming about the NBA playoffs. We posted some videos. So if you want to check those out, those are going to be coming out. We'll be talking about how far the Nets can go with James Harden. Put a little money on James Harden getting the job done for the Nets in terms of, I didn't put some money on it, but I told a buddy to put some money on it in terms of them being able to get it done without James Harden today, and they're well on their way, so I'm pretty happy about that. But we talked about how far the Nets can go without James Harden. We talked about the Dallas Mavericks and what Kristaps Porzingis is and why the Mavs need to get better. We talked about all kinds of stuff with the NBA, so if you want to check that stuff out, Blake and Vish Sports, we need to have Jason Aponte soon. I mean, this is the most popular man in 49ers podcasting. He's going on to Mean the Dreams channel in another 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to even.
I've been on a lot of people's pods, and I've never been more excited. I'm sorry, Vish. I didn't mean to, say that with you and everything.
I'll remember this one, Jason. This hurts a little bit. Not gonna lie.
No, honestly, to join I Mean the Dreams stream in a little bit, honestly, is probably one of the highlights of ever, honestly, when it comes to that. But Vish, you know what it is, man. It's just that when you get a call from I Mean the Dream, and Amin is big time in me right now. He doesn't want to follow me back on Twitter, and I'm good with that. I'm fine with it because it's just like, hey man, I'm just happy to be part of the show at this point. I'm sorry, Vish.
So interesting thing with Amin, right? Like I don't really watch the Cone Phone and stuff. So like the first time I got introduced with Amin, like I'm excited, right? Amin's this big deal. He shoots the email to Blake and I asking us to come on. And he says, "Hi, this is Amin the Dream from the Cone Phone. All the people call me Mini Vish." And he says that in the email to us. And I was like, wait, what? And then, and so I thought that was interesting. But my man Amin kills it. Like, I've never seen a 13-year-old with the level of eloquence, confidence, and just like the absolute, he's so concise, but he's so like, he doesn't mince his words. And I think that's kind of like, how naive, I guess he's a little more naive just because the awareness, he's just trying to be 100% honest. There's no hidden agendas with what he's saying. So like the authenticity stands out a bit more because he's 13. He doesn't care if anybody cares what he has to say. He's just going to say exactly what the truth is. And he preaches. So I'm glad he's getting you on. He's doing awesome stuff.
No, honestly, yeah, man.
And you'll help his clout. You're a big deal.
I don't know about that. I mean, honestly, I'm just a guy yelling at a camera at this point. But Vish, thank you for jumping on, man. I think that wide receiver talk is always my favorite thing to do. That's why when Croc asked me to join, I was just like, man, I love it. I don't really and when we could talk about Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk in this way, I know how much you love Deebo. You know how much I love receivers and stuff. I thought this was a great discussion, Vish. Thank you as always for joining, and for everybody that's watched, thank you for your donations. Thank you for just watching, honestly. Like, subscribe, make sure you sub to Vish's channel as well, Blake and Vish Sports. He's got way more subs than me, honestly, so maybe you can help me out. Maybe you could send some of those guys over to me, but you better
honestly, be coming over here. This is Jason Aponte. This is like the biggest guy on Twitter. This guy's probably going to be verified soon.
No, I tried and I got denied. Let's just say
you got denied.
I got denied. Yeah, it was my fault because I don't think I followed the instructions correctly, but that's a discussion for another day.
I tried too, not because I think I'm going to get verified, just because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I just shot it.
That's what I said too. And after a few days, I kind of talked myself into getting verified. And then when it didn't happen, I was a little disappointed. But hey, whatever. We're working.
I don't even think I care about being verified. I just think it would be a fun thing to send to my buddies. Like, yo, your boy just got verified on Twitter. Because it's like, there's nothing more to it than that. Like, I could care less.
No, honestly, man, thank you for joining. I appreciate you, Vish. It's always good to talk with you, man. And thank you guys again. Anybody that's watched, make sure you like, subscribe, share the video with anybody, any 49er fan that you know. For Jason, for Vish, we're out of here.
Yeah.